So for everyone who's here and for everyone who's coming in, I really want to thank you for joining us tonight. This is a program that Sana and I have been talking about literally for months now. So we're so happy that it's finally here, and we're so happy that Stephen was able to be a part of it. So exciting. I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of both of these people personally. So I'm fangirling tonight, big time. And if this is your first MOFAD program, this is really exciting to have you. We do programs all the time now online. As many of you know, we are a physical museum and our doors are closed because of the pandemic. We're based in New York City. Right before we closed, we were about to open our big exhibition that we've been working on for 3 years, African/American Making the Nation's Table. We are planning to open that exhibition one day when it feels safe and right to do so, and we can't wait to host you there when that happens. But for now, this is where we are, and the great news is that we have still found wonderful ways to connect with so many people. So we're so happy you're here. We're so happy there's ways to still, connect and have community. So thank you so much. If you're not part of our community via the newsletter, I definitely recommend you signing up. Like I said, we do programs all the time. We have one next week that looks at chop suey, the dish, and traces the origins to both Asia and the Caribbean, exploring the intersections of Asian and African-American cuisine. So we hope you'll join us for that. Okay, so I want to turn it over to our wonderful guest tonight. Sana, why don't you first introduce yourself, please?
Sure, yeah. Well, hi, I'm Javeri Kadri. I'm the founder of Diaspora Co, which I think most of you know, but is a direct trade spice company. I founded it in 2017, kind of inspired by domestic farm-to-table supply chains, but also the bean to bar chocolates and the blue bottles and Stumptowns of the world, and really wanted to see that kind of ownership of global food supply chains, specifically for spices. We started out as a fiercely queer company dedicated to decolonization. And yeah, I think we've stayed pretty true to that. It's been a long 3 years. And Stephen has been, one of my best friends and confidants through that process. I feel like we both raised our children, these businesses together. And have had many a drink and tears over this process. So yeah, feels great to be in conversation with my homie.
Yeah, great. Stephen, please just go ahead, introduce yourself, and then kick it off, and I'll see you in a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Much love. Like Sana said, it's always special when we have a chance to connect online or offline in private or among friends in the physical form or digital. I'm Stephen Satterfield. I publish a magazine called Whetstone. I am co-founder of a media company by the same name. We highlight stories on food origin, culture, and anthropology. So we study and document and report on the origins of things we eat and drink. Along with my co-founder, Melissa Shee. We are also producers of podcasts. We are producers of film and video, and we are just trying to grow our business. So I think that's what we're going to talk to you guys about tonight.
Also, for those of people that don't know, Point of Origin is probably the best food podcast out there right now, and very much worth listening to.
Thank you, Sana.
Yeah, just had to hype. What should we start with?
Okay, so I have some ideas, and people who know my work will not be surprised, and also people who've read the subject of the evening will not be surprised, but I think that we should talk a lot about origins because it is a very generous framework for understanding, as I often say. And I know for me, I am constantly getting questions about Whetstone in terms of how we do it, how long we've been doing it, how it all works. So I feel in the spirit of generosity, I want to talk about our work. But I would love to know from you, the origins of diaspora, and in like a really granular way, if you can tell us like actually what your company is and what you sell.
Yeah. All right, big one. I think the earlier, before, you know, everybody joined the conversation, we were joking about diaspora essentially is just artisanal warehousing. It's like moving pallets of spices from one continent to the other, and it's the oldest industry in the game. It's been happening for thousands of years. This shit isn't new. But in terms of the origin story of diaspora, it goes back to, I've been working in the food industry for a decade, and I consistently was looking for like, well, where do I fit? Like, where are my strengths and like everything I bring to the table best used? I've worked every job from like the Van Leeuwen ice cream delivery driver to like a farm worker to a baker to a marketing manager, and I didn't find that I fit anywhere. Those roles weren't meant for me, and I didn't have the opportunity to tell the stories I wanted to tell, which I think you can echo tremendously. And so in 2016, when the turmeric latte craze was kind of exploding, there was this idea that maybe I can look into where turmeric comes from and who's growing it. And maybe it'll be, you know, a feature, like a photo shoot. And if Whetstone had existed, I probably would have pitched it to Whetstone. And then the more I ended up taking time off, going back to India, where my family's from and where I was raised. And the more I learned about the spice trade, specifically from like an academic kind of critical theory, what does decolonization for the food system look like lens, the more it seemed like if you're interested in the work of like decolonization, which this big word just means like dismantling power and redistributing it, spices is like this ripe, amazing place to start and this beautiful metaphor. And at the same time, I wanted something that would wholly encompass who I was. So something that was markedly BIPOC led and a brown, queer, radical space. In 2016, that was scary. It was met with a lot of trolling, a lot of hate mail. But I'm really grateful to like baby 23-year-old me that held true to that mission and was like, no, this has power. And like, there has, my voice and what I have to offer within this supply chain, within rebuilding the food system, has to have more importance than the internet is telling me that it has. So I guess that's how we started. We started with turmeric, and then we've added on 4 more spices since. We spend anywhere from like 2 to 14 months sourcing a spice. It's a really slow process. Our farm partners are just that. They're our partners. We work super slowly and intentionally with them to help them scale, to give them the capital that they need, to make sure we're representing their stories accurately. So yeah, it's multifaceted, complex work. Does that answer your question? You're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to make sure there was no noise in the background to stop you. I'm interested in, I still want to talk about product, but when you were talking about decolonizing in your work, you've come to this in a kind of academic perspective. It is a word in the vernacular and in the culture right now that I think
It's very trendy.
Yeah, right. How like how we were using it as kind of I guess like people who were parts of different cultures where this was centered in their work. This is part of our language, part of a certain mindset, whereas what you're describing in terms of decolonization is like a little bit more academic. So can you say more specifically, like, can you talk more about decolonization in your work? What it means both from like the academic perspective that brought you to it and a more embodied perspective, like that you wear like a cape. Yeah, like the work.
Yeah, because I think right now the conversation about decolonization is still largely representation based, and it's about like going to build a new table, or should we just join the table, or like, what should we do about the table? And I'm talking about it in that the system of the spice trade, which is that spices being bought from India or, you know, Asia at large, being sold to the West, is and was a colonial practice. And if you want to bring equity to something that was formerly a colonial practice, where the middlemen made, you know, 300x of them, I had like a 300x markup. We're decolonizing the system, which is a little bit less sexy, right? It doesn't mean that like we are necessarily hosting panels, or I think we're bringing people to the table in a more complex way. So for me right now, what that means is, what I have realized is that we work with about 150 farm workers across India. So all the farms that we work with at this point are male owned. I'm very open and honest about that. That's how land is passed down in India largely, except in the Northeast. But then all the laborers who work on these farms are women, and they're usually Dalit or tribal women, Dalit being the lowest caste. And so when I'm thinking about decolonization, it's not just ensuring that that farmer is making, you know, 6x the market price on his product, but it's also ensuring that like that system of labor on farms, on Indian farms, that's really, really messed up in colonial era, can be dismantled. So that means shifting people from, you know, daily wages to salaries, or shifting people from daily wages and not having access to stable housing to work, kind of pushing our farmers to include housing in the debate, or in what's offered as compensation, or more recently to offer health insurance. Like that's a benefit that we're offering to any farmer that buys more than 2 metric tons from us. And to offer like really high-end good healthcare to a caste bracket that has been systemically oppressed for hundreds of years. That to me is the work of decolonizing. It's probably not the work that we get the most hits for on Instagram, but we make our packaging sexy so that we can do that work. Like it's a means to an end. So that's one part of it. Now, you know, going forward, the other part is like, how does every single stakeholder in this supply chain of like getting spices from India to here to people's kitchens benefit from this beyond just a wage? And that probably looks like employee equity down the line. And that's something I'm hopeful and excited about. Yeah, I guess that's the decolonization piece. But I think the main thing that I've been harping about for a long time is that I don't, of course, like whiteness can address decolonization. But as long as the primary like structures are white led, I don't fully buy that decolonization can happen. Just because people are like sourcing shit ethically, but no brown people and black people are like actively accumulating wealth over it. I don't buy it. I think accumulation of wealth is an important complication to discuss within decolonization, because like if we're decolonizing within capitalism, there is going to be an accumulation of wealth somewhere, right? So it's about where that happens.
Definitely. And also, no. And also too about what our responsibilities are as business owners in a capitalist environment, you know, where we are trying to operate from a mindset that is rooted in decolonization, that is rooted in liberation, and also being fully mindful that it's an impossibility within the framework of capitalism. And all the contradictions that go along with that. You know, what a couple of things that you said for me, like, of course, in the last couple months, as you alluded to, the work that began for us in 2016 has grown more visible. You're better at social media than me, so I guess we're just now starting to come online.
Your captions are excellent, though. But, I don't have your caption game.
Appreciate you. But like the attention and the kind of mainstreaming of a lot of messages and ideas that we have been purporting and advocating for the last 4 years and longer even. I wonder, I know for me, it has created a kind of tension, not just as a business owner, but as an individual, and trying to understand what my relationship is to this technology, and to these communities, and even, you know, sub communities of people that I really know and feel accountable to versus people who I want to come along. So I want to ask you about how your message has changed, if at all, how your audience has changed, if at all, and how the ways in which the messages that you're putting out into the world are being received, let's say since the spring of 2020 until right now.
Asking the hard questions. After I answer this question, I'm turning it all back to you because you're a very good podcast host and you'll just keep me talking.
Because the people want to hear from you. Me too.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we first started out, my community was like baby gays. That's what I was marketing to, like my 50 baby gays. And from there, seeing the excitement around a more thoughtfully sourced product, the company grew very quickly from 2016 to 2018. Like I don't remember that year and a half. And suddenly we were a thing, we were a real thing. But I think during that time, I recognized that I didn't have resources and I didn't have a very strong network, but that, for, you know, to be blunt, like proximity to whiteness gave me those things. And so realizing that the people that wanted turmeric the most were white ladies for their turmeric lattes. And I think some of the messaging did shift to cater to that and to be like, hey, like, do you want to buy? Because I was like, who cares how I message to them if the work that it allows me to do stays true to what it is, which is, you know, taking care of my farm partners. And I think I led myself astray a little bit there, where I maybe didn't recognize what a influence we had as a business to lead culture, and to actually define how you message and define who, how you brand things. And I feel like since the spring, for me, it's been a reassuring, like, return to the course, like return to idealistic, hopeful Sana from 2016, of I want to do it all and I want to do it my way, and I don't want to, like, you know, have to market lentil soup instead of dal in order to do it. And I think everybody here knows what I'm talking about. And I think going forward, what I'm struggling with, but in an exciting way, is how to be a thought leader whilst also trying to be a CEO. And that's where you go back to that tension between capitalism and decolonization, right? And how you navigate that. What about you?
You mean in terms of messaging?
Yeah, I'm interested of, like, you know, from where Whetstone started to today, has the message shifted? Has the message been solidified? But maybe you start with the origin story first so people have context.
That's true. All right, well, I'll talk about 2016 because that was a pivotal year in the world, in the United States. It's also the year that I did start to bring forth the idea of Whetstone to the public and to the world. And our origin story, succinctly, is that year in the spring, I tried a Kickstarter campaign that didn't work. We raised some money. We ended up being well short of our $50,000 goal. We had to give the money back, and it took a full year to come out with the first volume of the magazine, which came out in fall of 2017. And since then, we have basically used the sales of the magazine, one edition over the next, to slowly grow the print. And now we're on our 6th. and it's actually going to the printer next week. So we'll be shipping that in August. And in terms of messaging, our message hasn't ever changed. I think that, and in fact, recently, when all this shit started going down with Bon Appetit, and if people are watching who are unaware what I mean by this shit, it's part of a larger corporation, but also a larger institutional issue of racism in our industry, food media, or in media more broadly, but in every industry. And the way that it manifested in food media is the most visible and prominent media organization, Bon Appetit magazine. They have very publicly for the last several months been botching very credible and for them embarrassing instances of institutional racism in their organization. Their former editor-in-chief was, I guess, let go for having a racist photograph in his Instagram where he was in the costume of a Puerto Rican person. They have had really egregious examples of payment inequality and disparity, where their most profitable venture, the video, where the white male leads, I believe, reportedly make up to $500,000 a year on their very lucrative contracts, and the POC workers who were also appearing on video in the same ad slots were being paid $300 or $600 at a time. This is to say nothing of the editorial content itself, the appropriation, which has butted up against Sana's work and even made Sana part of the news, which you could talk about or not if you want to. But for us, it's like we're now seeing a full manifestation of all of the reasons why I wanted Whetstone to exist. Frankly, I could have never imagined the staggering incompetence on the level and racism on the level that we're seeing now with Bon Appetit. So that for me has been revelatory, even though I have been skeptical. But as far as the value proposition that we had for people in 2016, which is we're all too sophisticated and grown up and diverse for this whitewash bullshit that we're getting from Bon Appetit, we should start something different. That was our message then. That's still our message. And I think it's a little bit more nuanced now as the media landscape has changed so much in the last 4 years with continued fragmentation and people finding their own sub communities to burrow further into. But fundamentally our goals as a media company have always been consistent. We've always wanted to make magazines and podcasts and videos. We're doing all that. And we always wanted to make that work from a perspective that was not centered in whiteness, which is in some ways inherent, considering that we have 2 POC owners. But we also wanted to be explicit about that and talk about why that mattered and talk about why that made our shit better and talk about why that was good for culture. And so we've been talking our shit, for the last 4 years. And I do think now people sense more of the urgency around some of the things that we have been saying. And I do remain optimistic. Like when I think about my homegirl Clancy, who is coming out with For the Culture magazine, a magazine focusing on Black women in food and drink. I am optimistic about where our industry is heading. But at the same time, I do feel a certain way about individuals and brands who are trying to adopt yeah, right. Like I don't know, I'm still looking at them sideways, and I feel more compelled than ever to ride for all the people who have been talking their shit before, everyone else jumped on board.
Yeah. And I guess you were mentioning about Clancy and your Kickstarter, and I feel like it's really powerful to lead with the fact that you started with failure and kind of grew out of that, and it was, I don't think it was a failure of Whetstone, it was a failure of like the ecosystem that Whetstone was born into, where there was such a cynicism around like, well, print is dead, so what's the point of this? And why was print dead? Because people weren't interested in consuming better media.
Exactly.
And I think now there's this shift of like people actually realizing like, oh, if I want better media, I should probably pay for it.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. Similarly to our products, where I've dealt with 3 years of people just bitching about how much our stuff costs. And for the first time, they're like, oh, how do I give you my money? But at the same time, like, how can you deliver within 2 days like Amazon? Like, I want to support, like,
Yo, they don't know the post office is fucking our whole thing up, man. The post office, yo, I'm worried for real.
Yeah, I mean,
It's taken longer than ever. USPS, they're defunding the post office. Like, it's a different conversation, but yeah, for us, we have benefited from a more, I guess because we're very human, like they know that there are individuals behind these email addresses when we're dealing with delays and so on. And for all the reasons that we're talking about, you know, just a general kind of a broader kind of empathy for people in our position, because there's not that many of us. But at the same time, like I really, I'm grateful that it's here, but it has taken me a lot of processing and reconciling to deal with the visibility and everything that it took for us to be visible. And I also wonder too, if the people who love Bon Appetit will ever care. Like they're like, I wonder how these audiences work themselves out, I guess, is a thing that I'm thinking about. Because right now they can't even post on their own social media without getting clowned by their own community, you know? And so it's like, what's the end game there, you know, for where we're heading with media? Honestly, I have no idea where this is all going.
Yeah.
But I do feel because we have been solid in our identity and our message, like I feel secure in going forth. But looking at the broader landscape, it's wild times like everything else.
Who do you feel is the Whetstone audience?
Whoever your audience is.
Yeah, this morning when I was making my notes, I was like, why haven't I taken out a full page ad in Whetstone magazine yet?
Hey, there you go. We got you on a discount. Honestly though, I think whoever buys your products buys our stuff, you know. We mostly sell to women, I know that. We're about 60-40. Most of our people are educated.
We're 90-10.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
Damn.
It's
do you think that's got to be I mean, it's got to be your messaging, the branding? What do you think that is? That's a huge number. That's a
I think, you know, we do not appeal to like the home chef male ego around cooking. So the brands for that, and I'm not that. So I think that filters a lot of people out. I definitely feel like I talk about our audience as like anybody that cares about good olive oil or like where their chocolate comes from probably is interested in our spices, but then we take it a step further. So that tends, I mean, the people that are willing to, other than like the chef bros, the people that are willing to spend the money on good olive oil, we should ask like Aishwarya Brightland about her demographic. But I'm pretty sure it's women.
Yeah, it's women. And we have probably overlapping groups of predominantly women. We're probably more in the 60-40 zone. But you know, much like yourself, you know, who have come from academia or have come from academic backgrounds. And a lot of our subject matter is very cozy with academic work. You know, we even say overtly, like, this is a culinary anthropology venture, or, you know, this is food origins and anthropology. So that's certainly resonant for people who have academic backgrounds. But you know, there is a kind of just like softness to the material, because we are often telling stories of nurturing, of stewardship, of migration, and like those kinds of accounts of bravery and family and community. It's all, of course, women led. The people who are able to best encapsulate that and present it to us as a pitch are mostly women. And so as a result, I think, you know, we have a brand that, even though I am a male co-founder, cis male co-founder, the brand itself, I think, I mean, does kind of lend itself. And it is because, yeah, exactly. Mel, my business partner, has a very heavy thumbprint on the business operationally, and just like for gut checks too. Like, we have had issues in the past where even the photography, which was submitted by women in most cases, had a lot of like men facing the camera with eyes making the camera, and we had to like go through and be like, wait a minute, what are we perpetuating here? We have all these images to pull from. How is it that we always are ending up with men in front of the camera? So we've even had to check ourselves, because we want to embody, like, we want to have a particular sensitivity, as you mentioned, to the message and the media, because at the moment I am the only Black publisher in the US, because we are claiming to represent you know, many different diasporas and many different identities concurrently. We want to be rigorous with how we handle ourselves and our own internal critique. So we are trying to always improve. And I think having a lot of feminine energy in the mix just clearly makes us better and stronger. And again, I don't know why other institutions don't get it.
I struggle with what you just described with photography, because as you know, I used to be a photographer. And
a great one too, not used to be. Legendary. We got the cover, volume 3.
I was on the cover, Whetstone volume 2. But you know how so much of my childhood in India was defined by National Geographic, which is inherently racist in their photography, and very orientalist, reductive, all the words. And if that's what you were taught, how do you unlearn that in your own work has been challenging, because on one hand, I want to document our farm partners as like beautifully and really, and like in ways that they're comfortable and tell the full story. But on the other hand, like, why do you have to show a photo of like, you know, a rugged handed brown farmer in order to like virtue signal your authenticity? So it's complicated. And often the other complicated part is that the owner of the farm might be an Indian man, but the laborers are women, and the wives and the daughters and the sisters within that family actually do all the work, but they have never been given the ability to represent their family in front of a buyer like me. And so how do you tell their stories in your marketing materials, because they're also the ones, you know, up late harvesting or sorting. I feel like I've had to check myself on that a lot, of like wanting, and this is where the usage of the app is difficult, because like I also want engagement. I want those likes, because those likes generate how many eyeballs I have, right? And often the most powerful work is not the work that gets the most eyeballs. So it's been a tricky balance in that way, but exciting to push it forward.
Yeah, I hear that though. I mean, you know, you talk about eyeballs. That's a word that we hear all the time in our business, in media, in our industry. It's essentially currency. And, you know, we've never had like a comprehensive marketing strategy or anything like that. Not because we didn't want to, but because we couldn't fund it. We've had to consolidate all of our energy on operations, both creative or I guess editorial and fulfillment. But you know, thinking about technology, I think about I'm really thinking about it a lot more too, because basically what I am doing right now couldn't have been possible even 10 years ago. Like, essentially the reason why we can do what we can do is because of Instagram, because of Squarespace, because of, you know, the internet, more broadly. And I really am kind of now trying to understand what my relationship to these tools are, because as a Black publisher, I'm like, let me just focus on that part of my identity, because that's for me the most substantive part. Like, I'm trying to be that, trying to embody that, and the work that goes along with that is my motivation, it's my impetus, it's like the cape that I want to wear. But like, unfortunately, I have to get in the minutia of social media and of Mark Zuckerberg owned Instagram and be like, okay, how do we make people feel a certain way about the work that I'm doing, which is, you know, many steps down the line about Black ownership and publishing. And yet we got to like wrap it up in this emotion and this image and this copy, in a way that's real for us, in an environment that feels really just quite superficial, to be blunt. So I haven't figured that out. I have struggled with it. But I am grateful that I do believe that, as I mentioned earlier, with the fragmentation, what the technology has afforded is for us to more easily identify our respective communities and people that we are in community with. And so I'm grateful that the technology allows me to be independent and entrepreneurial. But I'm very, more than ever, I'm super duper skeptical about Instagram in particular, and like social media more broadly. All right, I want to ask you something, because we have 4 minutes left before the general questions. Maybe people will ask you, but I want to ask you because I wanted to talk about the messy stuff a little bit, because that's what people want to know from us. They want to know the messy parts, and I think, you know, we're in a service mindset right now, so we're going to do that. So
be generous.
Yes, so let's talk about money. Okay. We have never at Whetstone been able to raise capital. We have been able to function without capital as a bootstrap business. There's all kinds of challenges that go along with that. But if people are watching and they're like, I want my own business so I can decolonize, so I can be independent, but I don't have any cash. Can you tell us about your money journey?
I'm going to do this in 2 minutes because I want you to answer this too.
Okay.
And I know people want to know. So my approach, you know, I was an art major in school. My my business plan was a pie chart. But my dad gave me an $8K loan when I started the business. I had $3K from my 2016 tax refund. So I totally had $11K to my name. I spent all of that on our first round of turmeric. And then was like, well, okay, I have turmeric. What do I do now? And similarly to you know, I wouldn't have been able to exist without all the apps, without the Squarespace and the Instagram and the QuickBooks and all that stuff that like allows you to build a business online and do it by yourself. I also, the part that I now reiterate to myself to be kind to myself is that I moved here 8 years ago. I knew 7 people in this country. So every network and like community that I'm part of, I have built from scratch. I am the first person to admit that I had a lot of privilege and that, you know, I came here for an elite undergraduate education. But that doesn't take away from the fact like, I didn't know anybody. And so when I struggle with the fact that like, I didn't have the network to raise capital early on and had to do this bootstrapped, it's because I didn't have access to those clubs and I didn't know who those people were. It's only now, nearly 4 years in, that I am starting to be able to make those connections and even feel comfortable in the same room as some of those connections.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much just imposter syndrome for so long that I couldn't exist in those spaces without having a panic attack. We have grown just on cash flow. I made my first salary this month. Before that, all I did was expense my rent and hustle with other gigs.
Hey, congratulations, homie.
Thank you.
That's great.
But I don't mean the, like, you know, I didn't take a salary for 3 years as like a glorification thing.
No, it's not.
At all. Like, I really, for any of the business owners out there, I hope you can take a salary sooner and like have the financial know-how to work that in, and even the willpower to work that in early on. The smart thing that I did do was I moved into a 10-person co-op. You remember this? And like my bad time, but my like life expenses were $1,500 a month for the first year and a half of the business, and that was crucial. You know, having no expenses basically. Like, I could work 2 shifts at our neighborhood Mexican restaurant as a fry cook, and like that, I was okay with that. So that's my quick answer. Your turn.
Yeah. Well, I just want to point out that because we have similar stories actually. And
Do you remember the first time we sat down in that church cafe in Oakland?
The church cafe. Wait, on church cafe.
By the lake, remember?
Oh, that's right. That's right. I do remember.
And we were
that.
both like, "You're
Like,
broke. I'm broke. Okay."
Well, no, we're just slightly less broke.
We're getting there.
We are getting there. So I have a similar story to you, and I really feel that it's essential to center privilege in talking about how we have built these companies. Because if you don't have capital, then you have to have privilege. Otherwise, if you see a top 30 list on Forbes, I promise you those individuals,
have so much bitterness about that list.
They came from money, or they have proximity to money or whiteness, as Sana says. So the same is true for me. We didn't have any cash, but I have long been a part of an unbelievable network of cherished friends who have supported me in many of my ventures as an adult that have not been rooted in capitalism and have rendered me, I don't know, nomadic without a primary home or occupation. And Whetstone is kind of similar. So, you know, I am indebted quite literally to over a dozen very close friends who let me stay with them over the course of 2.5 years. I too probably, I don't even think I was at 1,500. I think I maybe got my overhead down to like 1,000 a month. Of course, again, not paying rent, it is easy to do that. And from there, you know, same thing. We had to do Indiegogo after Kickstarter, so we were zeroed out. Indiegogo, there is a massive enthusiasm gap from our first campaign on Kickstarter, and then people feel like, oh, they ain't shit, they ain't gonna get that, so I'm not gonna support that. And so, you know, I think we had like $6,000 that next time, and then I had a very small amount of credit left because I was living on credit. So I think I want to say it put down like $3,000 more dollars, so I had 9,000, and that allowed me to print 400 copies of Whetstone Volume 1. And like you said, you know, we flipped it from cash flow. So as much as like I do think it's crucial to center the privilege that we have, you know, we need to also pop our collars that we created these businesses from cash flow. And I know that we had a lot of conversations with a lot of people along the way who told us that we couldn't do that. And then we did that. So,
and I think also, you know, when people But when people like, so often I get asked like, why don't you guys have more spices? And I'm like, do you know how much a new spice costs? And you know, here's definitely where our community has been super powerful and kind, where we also had a Kickstarter last year and we raised 55K from it for our cardamom partner farm. And what folks don't know is that like I legit couldn't pay him until Kickstarter dispersed the funds. And Kickstarter doesn't disperse the funds until 3 weeks after your thing ends. And so my farmer was like, I have sent you the product. Like usually we operate on advances. So this was just like heartbreaking for me that this guy had sent me the product, we were bottling it, and I didn't have the 50K to pay him. Similarly, at the beginning of this year, I didn't, you know, we had onboarded 4 spices, but we went from buying a few hundred kilograms of them to needing a few tons. And that's, you know, that's about 120K right there. How is one holiday season with 4 spices supposed to give you enough money for a whole year's harvest the next year when you have to pay your farmers upfront so that they can live? And that's where pre-orders have been incredible. And I think I hate the pre-order model, partly because people get antsy and have been driving my customer service person insane, but also we wouldn't exist without that money. You know, in March, I had very little monies to my name.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, just came on here. Are we being shut down?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, you're not being shut down.
Happy Q&A.
First of all, this is the first panel conversation out of like 5,000 that we've done where everyone watching is like, we don't want to do Q&A. We just want to hear them talk more.
Okay, we can go back to Stephen then.
No. So that's amazing. No, we do have a couple questions, but I feel like they're questions you would ask each other anyway. So I'm just going to like drop them in and then pop out again. I mean, 2 questions that I go to both of you are like, where do you want your businesses to grow? Like what's the future goal? And then while I'm here, there's a question for Sana. Were there powerful interests in the middle supply chain that Diaspora Co went around in order to source directly, which is like, I think something that you should definitely talk about.
Yeah, should I start with that?
Like, yeah.
Yeah, very powerful interests. So in Hindi, mari is pepper, and mariwalas mean like, technically, I guess that means like pepper man. And the mariwalas are some of the most wealthy people in the country. My mentor is a mariwala, and she definitely had to like sidestep to the side when I got into this business, because she was like, nope, all my family money is like too invested in pepper to really like mentor you on this. The spice industry in India is so rooted in, so colonialism existed, then we got independence and capitalism took over. And within the caste system, the trader class, or the banyas, who are still pretty high up in the caste system, really swooped in where the British had left. And so that idea that the middlemen were making all the money continued to perpetuate, and they have done everything to consolidate that power so that, you know, a young woman like me can't come in and do what I do. So from the fact that like the Spice Board of India, which is kind of a body that you have to become a part of in order to import, doesn't accept new membership unless you are vetted by people within the Spice Board. Why would they give me membership? They have no desire to. Similarly with, you know, the inspections for the Spice Board of India, they hated that I was paying our farm partners as much as I was, to the point where we actually were forced to go through like an audit and an investigation by the Spice Board about why we were paying our farmers so much, because they were like, it has to be money laundering. That's what she's doing. And I was like, no, you fools are money laundering. But it meant that I had to hire, you know, a full-time person to deal with that audit and to manage that. And luckily labor costs in India are cheap enough that I could manage. But yeah, I think if I didn't have the childhood in India, the resources there, 2 employees in India, the ability to speak 4 different Indian languages, and my whole home there, I don't think I could have circumvented a lot of these systems, which is why I'm very wary of the term direct trade, especially when there's sourcing coming from all over the world. I find it like I am a pretty smart person, and like I have really struggled to build a supply chain, and I can't imagine how people without my access to language, culture, networks could do the same thing or do the same work and use the same words as me and it mean the same thing. That's my long answer.
Thanks,
I like
Sana.
that.
That's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can both of you talk about where you want your businesses to go? Stephen first.
I'm just sitting with that answer. We want to grow. I mean, you know, we're just trying to get bigger. Like, again, we are operating within a system of capitalism, so that means we need to continue to grow. Otherwise, we will cease to exist. These are not my rules. And you know, for us, that means we are just trying to make more of what we're doing. We're, of course, I'm very happy with the work that we're making. I'm pleased with our print product, with our podcast, where we're working with an amazing producer named Celine Glacier. And, you know, I'm happy with the work that we've been able to do, but we have struggled to make the work because the work requires resources, you know? And so I think whether it be you know, taking in cash, or whether it be continuing to grow from cash flow, I think growth is what I'm focusing on, so that more people can find out about Whetstone, so that we can work with more people.
Tell people about digital.
Digital. Oh yeah, the journal. Oh yeah. So yeah, last week we launched Whetstone Digital, or Whetstone Journal. So essentially it is the same editorial ethos and rigor from print, but we've brought that online now, which you can check out, whetstonemagazine.com/journal. And I'm excited. At least twice a week for the foreseeable future, we'll have new stories from all over the world, with top-notch writers and editors. And that was all just so we could work with more people beyond the you know, print product, which is so labor and resource intensive.
Yay.
Yeah.
If anybody hasn't watched the was it the Georgian wine video?
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right? That
Yeah.
is, I feel like, one of my favorite Whetstone dispatches. Everybody go watch that.
Thank you.
But for me, what does diaspora look like going forward? I'm on a pretty straight track. It's, you know, we had 1 spice last year. Now we have 5. We're getting to 15 next year. The heart of my work is supporting my farm partners. That work is slow. It's relationship building. It's growing at the rate of agriculture. When people are like, we want more, like, why does it sell out? What's wrong with you? I'm like, because we only grew that much. There isn't more. And so yeah, getting to more spices, but also I think building our network of farm partners in India who are able to support each other and being able to really uplift the work that they do in different ways. Like, I've also been thinking about the fact that for our turmeric farmer, he also grows purple corn and black rice. And he also sometimes grows chickpeas. For our cardamom farmer, he grows a beautiful coffee. For our pepper farmer, they grow amazing jackfruit. So down the line, the other thought is, how do we integrate their intercropping into our product assortment to, you know, if we're saying we are farm to jar spices, we can extend that farm to table supply chain in so many interesting ways. I love the work of Coda Farms, and Stephen's interviewed Robin, who's a friend and mentor to me, for his podcast. But Robin not only sells rice, but also chickpeas. And it's been really cool to see how, especially with her restaurant clients, she leverages the chickpeas as like part of the story. So that's something that's exciting me, but mostly we're getting to the point where we'll be 15 to 20 spices. And you can really come to us to stock your pantry. Yeah.
Look out, world.
Yeah, that is exciting. Sana, there's another question for you. Can you speak a little bit more about how you approach the conversations with farmers about dismantling colonial systems. In the food system, is this a challenging conversation?
Yeah, it's a conversation of translation too, where there's a lot of the words that we use here in diaspora that are not necessary to use back in India, and it's I think that context is very important. Like if I showed up spewing what like we put on our marketing materials to our farm partners, they would look at me like I'm insane. And so usually what I lead with is I want to make it so that your work is valued and profitable. And like, let me know how much we need to pay you. And often actually our farm partners lowball. And they say, oh, you only have to pay me 300 rupees a kg. And I'm like, wait, what are your water needs? Like, what are your labor costs? That doesn't sound right to me. And we usually push for more to pay them more. In terms of the decolonization angle, that doesn't really apply to them. They're so entrenched in the system that even trusting me as a buyer is such a big step for them, to not sell immediately upon harvest in cash to a trader, who shows up in a truck to your farm, but instead to wait for this like girl from America who wants you to like sort your spices to a certain specification. That's a leap of faith. Like, I don't think the conversation is around me doing them a favor. They're already pioneers and like leaders in their field, and I'm choosing them because there's that value connection. The whole villages usually call them insane because they grow organically, or because they have chosen to like resurrect an heirloom variety. I think I tend to play more the role of like friend who's confirming that they're not nuts, and that like what similar to the way I felt in 2016, where like I want to do this and I believe in this idea even if everybody doesn't believe in me. I think I show up and like see that in my farm partners, that like they feel like they might be nuts in what they're trying to do, and I'm there to be like, you are not nuts, and like we will get to a point where like everybody in this village will want to be you, and that happens. We've seen that happening.
Yeah, I remember, we had a conversation a couple of years ago about your work, and I remember you mentioning like some trust issues just presenting as a woman, and you were so young. You're still so young, but like when you started, it was a little bit like wild for you to just kind of appear as this like young female who was living in the United States.
I lied about my age. I pretended to have a husband. I made up all kinds of shit to get what I needed. And trust is built over time. We have 5 spices. I would say that I have a close relationship with only 2 out of our 5 farm partners. And that's not a failing on anybody's part. It's gonna take several harvests to get to that point.
The question before is just being clarified a little bit. Specifically, they meant providing health insurance to workers.
Oh, how do they react to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, very well, very excitedly. So many of these laborers have never been to a doctor, or never been, had access to a doctor, been told that if there's something wrong with them, they should act like it doesn't exist so that it doesn't come up as an issue. Our first round of health checkups, like, me coming from my Americanized now background, like I showed up super excited, like it was going to be this joyous day. And instead it was a really sad day, because our farm laborers were finding out what was wrong with them for the first time in their lives. And I had a photographer there, and I actually told her to go home an hour into it. I was like, I don't actually want you to be here for this. It's not fair to these people. But in the long run, it's been awesome, because now they know that it's simple things. Like if they need pads when they're on their period, they don't have to use a rag. And like, we'll pay for the pads. Like if they, I don't know, their hand is hurting, we'll get a simple painkiller. I found that the power of that has been more in the little things, like the small prescriptions that we pay for, or the like folks with blood pressure that now the doctor shows up twice a week to like take their blood pressure. It's more those little reassurances than the big, like, we have health insurance, or like we need this surgery. It's just trust building, I think.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Yeah, we'll just do two more and then we have to wrap because I know Sana has another event this evening. Um, so actually, I think this is a question for both of you. I mean, the question specifically was Sana, you mentioned before, like the customers who want their spices delivered, you know, overnight, like Amazon. How do you deal with that? But I think that's a question for you too, Stephen, you know, because you only just moved, you only just created this digital platform. So like just people who complain and want like that instant gratification of the product that you produce, like how do you both deal with that?
Stephen, you start.
Um, we are lucky that our readership has been generous with us as we've grown. There are, of course, some outliers, but honestly, for those individuals, it's like they're usually self-selecting with their decibels, with their volume level. And so if they get too loud for us or for me personally, then I'm quick to offer a refund and we could just be done with it. Because basically the emotional journey of dealing with um, exceptionally needy customers is not something that I currently have capacity for. Um, and when you look at like, you know, input, output, over the life of that customer, you know, we may make like $15 or something, you know, and it's just not worth it for me. But luckily those situations are extremely rare, and for the most part people are really centering their politics and their beliefs and their values when they buy from us. They know that there's individuals behind it, as I mentioned earlier, and we are right now still operating under the grace of that kindness of our readership.
That's amazing. I'm jealous. I have a twofold answer. One is, I don't know, some people might disagree with me. This might be like I wouldn't say this if this wasn't like a contained room. But I had a young queer woman of color running my customer service until about 4 months ago. And it was not healthy for her to be doing that because the large amount of people that were angry and that were like spewing hate were white women. And I didn't feel it was fair for her to be doing that work. And I think when she was really struggling in that role, I had to create customer service guidelines for her that were boundary based of like, you will be nice until this point, and this is when you will walk away from that conversation. And like, you can cancel the order and sign off as me, and I feel okay with that. And similar to Stephen, like there have been instances where I'm like, your order is canceled, love you, bye. You don't deserve this. It's okay. Like I'll find customers elsewhere. The other part of it is boundaries. Like, you know, I was raised in some ways in like that Japanese philosophy of like the customer is God. And Indians believe in that too, or maybe everybody in capitalism believes in that. And I've definitely walked away from that and said, I don't think that's accurate. Like, and I manage expectations very carefully with our customers where, you know, the first pre-order email I sent out, I was clear in saying, if you want these spices in a hurry and you're not willing to wait, don't order. If you like have any hurry whatsoever, just don't place an order. And I think I'm growing into that similarly with our customer service email. Like you now get an autoresponder the minute you email us, laying out like when to expect a response. If you email on a weekend, we will not respond until Tuesday morning. So therapy has helped me with boundaries, and I think extending that to customer care is important because like we are humans, and the reason Amazon works the way that it does is because it's built on oppression. And if we're dedicated to decolonization, screw that. No, thank you. Clearly drank too much of my rosé.
Nah, that's the truth.
That's the right amount. Okay, and last question. Craft food specifically is often, the business model often feels like a slightly more fair expression of capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the example is like there's growers in other parts of the world, and then American business owners like kind of exploit that and take it and market it as something like a luxury product. So how do young business owners do that differently? How did you do that?
Yeah. I was raised or taught by my professors and mentors that, if something's not affordable, it's not radical. That I struggle with that regularly because our spices cost $12. One way that I justify that is you buy, it's 7 years fresher than everything else on the market, so you use less. The other part of that for me is you can either buy, a $7 chocolate bar where a majority of the money goes to a white man, or you can buy a $7 chocolate bar by a company run by Black folks from the Bronx, where money not only goes to like the development of like the Bronx food ecosystem and a Black family-owned business, but also to their family farm connections in Trinidad. So similarly to us, like, as far as I know, I am the only woman of color in spice sourcing, at least at this level, in the world. There are no women really in my industry, specifically not women of color. And so I have to build wealth and, solid financials into my business in order to exist. And I think Stephen spoke to this a lot. My issue with, bean to bar chocolate, with coffee, was that there was this idea that the roasters or the like sommeliers or whatever of cacao were the ones really creating the beauty. I feel like I'm careful to make it clear that like me finding these products is not the work. The growing of these products by these farm partners, that's the work. I'm just spotlighting it. I'm just the marketer. I'm a salesperson at the end of the day. And I think that's problematic within like the luxury craft food industry is where we give all the glory to the white man with a beard. I think Mass Brothers is such a good example that crashed and burned, that the middleman gets the hype and is seen as the expert instead of the farm partners. And I struggle with that because some days I'm like, well, I deserve hype too. Like I do this every single day. And it's, yeah, I think it's a balance. Everybody can be spotlighted, but I think it starts from the producers being championed for first.
You ain't gotta apologize for that, Sana. I think you are operating in your truth and in a truth of the framework that we're existing within. Yeah. By you saying that you are a marketer and you prioritizing your end goal about the wellness and the viability of your farming partners, you're 100. It doesn't matter if you make money, to me, because you're not out here talking about virtue. You've already stated what you're in business for, so you should go.
Somebody in the comments just mentioned that, like, we expect like ethnic goods to be cheap, and there's something inherently racist there too and problematic there too.
Massively.
That it's important to disrupt. So maybe I won't be so apologetic. Thanks, guys.
No, don't. Our shit is expensive. We charge $100 for our annual subscription of Whetstone. There's so few people who can really afford that amount of money, and we won't be lowering that price anytime soon, because we can't, and because we also have other products like podcasts where we make $0 and anyone can listen to it for $0. But I've found, in having consistent message, in actually having a very strong editorial point of view, which is something I talk about a lot, that there is liberation there. So if there's, I guess, young POC entrepreneurs who are like watching this, we have to stop like
devaluing
and devaluing and apologizing. Like, it's all good. It's all good to say that you're a marketer, that you will actually have the most monetary value in the supply chain because of the way the shit is set up. You're talking about a caste system. If y'all are reading Isabel Wilkerson, she's talking about how that looks in our own country. Like, this shit has been so set up and well established. The fact that we're the only ones in this space is very telling. It's okay that we see the most value in the supply chain, but the impetus for us, as we've stated, and that we can be judged against, is what do we do with the resources generated?
Yeah.
Because that's all I want to be accountable for. I'm not here to talk about fairness on the supply chain in a system that I didn't create, that I've been forced to participate in, that has tried to kill me along the way.
I love that. Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you both. Everyone in the comments is cheering you guys on, being like, yes, charge more. You're both 100. And thank you everyone for buying a ticket for tonight, because you help keep us going, and it helps us pay Sana and Stephen and keep us as an organization open while our museum is closed. So we really, really appreciate you. Sana, Stephen, this is beautiful. I love you both so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much
for doing this.
It's great. Sorry, you're doing an awesome job
with the Ruby. Doing a
45 minutes, turn it around, new outfit, let's go.
Yeah, I'll be watching. I'm so jazzed by this. I'm like, double feature Sana tonight. Let's do it. I'll be following up with an email with everyone tomorrow. I'll make sure you know exactly how to buy Diaspora Co products if you haven't yet, and how to buy a subscription to Whetstone magazine, which of course you should. And we hope you come back to many more events so we can keep doing these. All right. Thank you both so much. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry. Love you, Sana.
Love you.
Ciao.